80,000 people were watching him when Michael Jackson dropped his microphone and nobody knew why. The king of pop was in the middle of Billie Jean, his most iconic song, when suddenly the music stopped. The entire Wembley Stadium fell into an eerie silence. Security guards looked confused. Band members froze on stage. And Michael Jackson, the man who never broke character during a performance, was walking toward the edge of the stage with tears streaming down his face. What happened next would become one of the most beautiful moments in concert history. But to understand this moment, we need to go back to that evening in London, July 1988. The Bad World Tour had been breaking records everywhere, and tonight's show at Wembley was supposed to be just another spectacular performance. Little did anyone know that a single person in the audience would change everything. The evening had started like every other concert on the Bad World Tour. Michael Jackson emerged from beneath the stage in his signature sparkle jacket and black fedora, sending 80,000 fans into absolute hysteria. The opening notes of "Wanna Be Startin' Somethin' filled the stadium, and for the first hour, everything was perfect. Michael moved across the stage with his legendary precision, hitting every note, every dance move, every pose that had made him the biggest star on the planet. But somewhere in the middle of the concert, during the opening notes of Billie Jean, something caught his eye. In the general admission area, about 30 rows from the stage, a young girl had collapsed. She couldn't have been more than 16, wearing a red Michael Jackson t-shirt, and she was being held by what appeared to be her mother. The crowd around them was still screaming and dancing, completely unaware of the drama unfolding. Michael's trained eye, honed by years of performing for massive crowds, immediately spotted the distress. He had always been hyper-aware of his audience, scanning faces, looking for connections, making sure everyone was safe. But this time was different. This time, he saw something that made him stop everything. In the middle of the second verse, Michael Jackson did something that no major recording artist had ever done before. He stopped singing. The backing track continued for a few seconds, but Michael had stepped away from the microphone. The 80,000 people in Wembley Stadium slowly began to realize that something was wrong. The screaming died down to a murmur, then to complete silence. Security guards looked at each other with confusion. The band members kept playing, unsure of what was happening. Michael walked to the front of the stage, raised his hand, and made a gesture that every musician in his band understood immediately: stop everything. The music died. The silence was deafening. You could hear people breathing in the stadium. And then Michael Jackson did something that no one expected. He pointed directly to the section where the girl had collapsed and spoke into the microphone: "Stop, stop, stop. Someone needs help over there. Can we get some medics to section B, please? We're not continuing until she's okay." The crowd turned to look where he was pointing. Some started to applaud, realizing what was happening. Others stood on their toes, trying to see what Michael had spotted from the stage. But Michael wasn't done. He wasn't going to just wait on stage while others helped. He was going to make sure personally. What happened next shocked everyone, including his own security team. Michael Jackson walked down the stage stairs and into the crowd. The king of pop, the most famous person on the planet, was walking through 80,000 people to reach one fan who needed help. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. People couldn't believe what they were seeing. Some reached out to touch him as he passed, but Michael's focus was laser-sharp. He had one mission: get to that girl and make sure she was all right. When he reached her, the scene was heartbreaking. The young fan was semi-conscious, being held by her mother who was crying. The girl was wearing a red Michael Jackson shirt that was now soaked with sweat, and she had a homemade sign that read, "I love you, Michael," in glittery letters. Michael knelt down beside them, took off his iconic black fedora, and gently placed it on the girl's head. Then he did something that would be talked about for decades. He took out his personal handkerchief, the one with his initials embroidered on it, and wiped the sweat from her forehead while softly singing, "She's out of my life," not for the 80,000 people watching, but just for her. But this is where the story gets truly incredible. The part that nobody expected. Subscribe and comment now, because what happens next will give you chills and show you exactly why Michael Jackson was more than just a performer. The girl's eyes fluttered open as she heard Michael's voice singing directly to her. When she realized who was holding her, she whispered something that only Michael could hear. Later, people close to the situation revealed that she had said, "I was afraid I'd never hear you sing again." Michael's response was immediate and emotional. Tears started flowing down his cheeks as he replied, "You'll always hear me sing, sweetheart. Always." He stayed with her until the paramedics arrived, refusing to return to the stage despite his security teams urging that they needed to continue the show. But Michael had made a decision that would define the rest of that evening. He helped the paramedics carry the stretcher to the ambulance, still wearing his sparkle jacket, his fedora now on the head of a fan who was being rushed to the hospital. The crowd watched in absolute silence as their hero put one person's well-being above the entertainment of 80,000 others. When Michael finally returned to the stage, he walked to the microphone and said something that would be quoted for decades, "Tonight showed me something. Music is powerful, but love is more powerful. That young lady reminded me why I do this. It's not for the fame, it's not for the money, it's for moments like this. For connection. For love." The crowd erupted in applause, but Michael raised his hand again for silence. "I want to dedicate the rest of tonight's show to her. Her name is Sarah, and she's going to be okay. But I need you all to help me send her some love. Can you do that?" What followed was one of the most emotional concert finales in history. Michael launched into "Man in the Mirror," and 80,000 people sang along, not just as fans, but as participants in something larger than entertainment. They were part of a moment of pure human connection. But the story doesn't end there. After the concert, Michael did something that his management team advised against. He went to the hospital to visit Sarah. He spent 2 hours with her and her family, singing softly, talking about life, and making sure she was truly all right. Before leaving, he gave her something that would become one of the most treasured possessions in music history, his sparkled glove from that night, signed with a message, "To Sarah, who reminded me what music is really about. Love always, MJ." The impact of that night changed Michael Jackson forever. Sarah's story spread around the world. News outlets picked up the story of the superstar who stopped his concert for one fan. But more importantly, it changed how Michael approached every future performance. From that night on, Michael Jackson made it a point to have medical staff positioned throughout every venue, and he installed a system where he could immediately communicate with security if he spotted anyone in distress. The black fedora that Michael placed on Sarah's head that night became a symbol. Sarah kept it, and years later, when Michael Jackson passed away, she donated it to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame with a plaque that reads, "This hat was placed on my head by Michael Jackson when he stopped his concert to save my life. He taught me that fame means nothing if you don't use it to help others." The impact rippled through the music industry. Other artists began implementing similar safety protocols at their concerts. The Sarah Protocol, as it became known in the industry, required major artists to have direct communication with medical staff during performances. Michael Jackson's legacy isn't just his music, his dance moves, or his groundbreaking videos. It's moments like this that show the man behind the myth. A man who understood that his platform came with responsibility, that his fame was meaningless if he couldn't use it to touch individual lives. Sarah recovered fully and went on to become a pediatric nurse, inspired by the care Michael showed her that night. She often tells her patients the story of how Michael Jackson taught her that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stop everything and pay attention to one person who needs help. The handkerchief that Michael used to wipe Sarah's forehead that night was preserved by her family. Today, it's displayed in a frame in Sarah's home, alongside a photo of that moment when the king of pop knelt beside a 16-year-old fan and showed the world what true stardom looks like. Share this story and subscribe if you believe that true greatness isn't about how many people know your name, but about how you treat the one person who needs you most. This is what made Michael Jackson the king of pop, not just his talent, but his heart. Michael Jackson showed us that night that the greatest performances aren't always on stage. Sometimes they happen when you stop performing altogether and start being human. That's a lesson that transcends music, transcends fame, and transcends time. The magic of Michael Jackson wasn't just in his moonwalk or his voice. It was in moments like these, when he reminded us all that behind every superstar should be a person who never forgets that their power means nothing if it's not used to lift others up. But there's more to this story that will completely change how you see celebrity culture. In the weeks following that concert, something remarkable happened. Other fans who had been at Wembley that night began sharing their own stories. A man named James, who had been sitting 10 rows behind Sarah, revealed that he had been going through a severe depression and had actually come to the concert planning to end his life afterward. Seeing Michael stop everything for one person made him realize that someone, somewhere, always cares. I watched this global superstar put one person above 80,000 others, James later wrote in a letter to Michael's fan club. If he could see the value in one person's life like that, maybe my life had value too. That night saved me in ways Michael will never know. The ripple effect continued. Sarah's mother, Margaret, had been struggling financially to pay for her daughter's medical treatments for a chronic condition. When word got out about Sarah's story, Michael Jackson quietly arranged for all of her medical expenses to be covered through his Heal the World Foundation. He never publicized this act of generosity, it only came to light years later through hospital records. Michael also established what he privately called the Guardian Angel Protocol for all his future tours. Before every concert, he would personally walk the venue with security, identifying potential problem areas and ensuring medical staff were positioned strategically. His production team was instructed to install special lighting that would allow him to clearly see the entire audience throughout the performance. The black fedora that became so symbolic wasn't just any hat. It was the same fedora Michael had worn during the recording of Billie Jean in the studio. He had kept it as a personal memento, and giving it to Sarah meant giving away a piece of his own artistic history. When Sarah's family later learned this detail, they tried to return it, but Michael insisted she keep it. That hat has seen more music history than most people ever will, he told Sarah's mother during his hospital visit. But tonight, it was exactly where it needed to be. Sometimes the most valuable things we own only find their true purpose when we give them away. The hospital staff that night reported something they had never seen before. When Michael arrived to visit Sarah, he didn't come with an entourage or security detail. He came alone, carrying a small portable keyboard and a bouquet of flowers he had personally picked from the hotel garden. He spent those 2 hours not just talking to Sarah, but to every child in the pediatric ward. He played quiet melodies on his keyboard and sang softly to children who were fighting their own battles. The hospital's head nurse later said, "In 30 years of nursing, I never saw anything like it." He wasn't performing, he was healing. One of the most touching moments happened when a 7-year-old boy named Tommy, who was undergoing cancer treatment, asked Michael why he had stopped his concert. Michael knelt down to Tommy's eye level and said, "Because when someone you love is hurting, nothing else matters. Not music, not thousands of people, nothing. Love always comes first." Tommy's parents, who had been told their son might not survive his treatment, watched as their child smiled for the first time in months. Tommy went on to beat his cancer, and years later became a pediatric oncologist himself, inspired by that night when Michael Jackson showed him that caring for one person could be more powerful than entertaining thousands. The influence of that evening extended far beyond individual lives. Major concert venues around the world began implementing what became known as the Michael Jackson Safety Standard. This included improved sightlines for performers to monitor their audiences, better medical response protocols, and training for artists on how to handle medical emergencies during performances. Even decades later, Sarah keeps that sparkled glove in a special display case in her home, not as a trophy, but as a reminder of the lesson Michael taught her that night. She became a pediatric nurse specializing in emergency care, and she tells every young patient the same thing Michael told her: "You matter. Your life has value. And sometimes, the whole world can stop just to make sure you're okay." The handkerchief Michael used that night became part of something even more meaningful. Sarah's family had it preserved and later, with the permission of the Jackson estate, had it displayed at children's hospitals around the world as part of a traveling exhibit called When Music Heals. The exhibit tells the stories of musicians who used their platform to help others, with Michael's story as the centerpiece. This is why Michael Jackson's legacy endures not just in his music, but in the countless lives he touched, by showing that true greatness isn't measured by how high you can rise, but by how willingly you'll come down to lift someone else up. That night at Wembley, the King of Pop showed 80,000 people what it really means to be royal, to serve others, especially when they need you most.